Cute baby girl, right? I wonder if I had a time machine, would I have gone back in time and changed this baby girl's life? Would I have prevented her from being born into a family of addicts and alcoholics? Would I have prevented her from witnessing the violent domestic abuse that she witnessed on a daily basis? Or would I have prevented her from entering all the institutions that she finally took a journey into? Foster care, hospitals, adolescent psychiatric units, and detention centres. And would I have prevented her from experiencing all the institutionalised abuse that she received in those places? What I know is I haven't got the capacity to build a time machine, but actually I have got the capacity to love. I absolutely can love hugely. And I love this baby girl because she is me. So let me introduce you to my grandfather and my father. My grandfather was William Walmsley, and my father was Michael Johnston. So as you can see there, they're both military men. But what you can't see is that they were both binge drinking alcoholics, and they were both perpetrators of domestic violence. My grandfather went to World War II, and he was described as a very gentle, kind, sensitive man when he left to go to war. When he came back, he was described as an outrageous monster, often isolating, often drinking, often taking lots of pain medication and gambling, and certainly engaging in domestic violence. Today, he was probably one of those who would have been described as having shell shock. Today, he'd be described as having PTSD, post-traumatic stress disorder. My father did not have an experience in combat, but he pretty much lived his life in combat, fighting with everybody who came into contact with him. He taught me everything I knew about relationships with men. He would regularly beat up on my mum, so as most kids would wake up in the morning and know they were getting Weetabix, I would wake up in the morning and know that my mum would have a broken collarbone or a punched nose or a grazed face. And he, once he'd beaten her up, he would not want anything to do with her. He would be hugely remorseful and guilty. And so when I was a 4, 5, 6-year-old tiny girl, what he would do is he would leave to go into another room, he would take me with him, and he would put me on his knee, and he would sob. He would sob about what he's just done. And what I learned to do there was to take care of him. So I would wipe his tears, pat him on the back, stroke his hair. In that moment, I was learning about my future relationships with men. That my purpose in the world would be to take care of wounded men. However, I couldn't live my life forever finger pointing at everybody else, because my life became so complicated and so complex that I ended up marrying 3 different men, not because I'm addicted to wedding cake, but because that was the pattern that I'd entered into. I was forever searching for that kind of tender love that my dad gave to me on the couch when I was 4, 5, 6 years old. And I looked for that in all the wrong places. So I couldn't go out there finger pointing that it was everybody else's job to fix my life. I'd been in such a kind of complex situation in my life. I'd chosen to blame it all on him or her or this or that. And ultimately, I had to go in and do some work about my family. And so this, kind of what you can see behind me, just this complicated mess, is what we call a genogram. And it's a full family system genogram. And I undertook this in 2011 with an organization called Clear Mind International, based in Vancouver. In family systems theory, it allows us to look at our past and begin to see the emerging themes. Not so that we can camp out and live in our past, but so that we can actually take differentiating steps to change our past into something far more purposeful in the future. You might not be able to see it here, but it shows there that I have a brother and a sister. My sister died as she was stillborn, so she died at birth. and my brother was killed, ironically, the only person in my family who didn't have an addiction, he was actually killed by a drink driver who was an addict alcoholic, who had repeated offences for drink driving. So you can see in that system, there's lots of complicated relationships there, emotional cut-off, illness, death. The three emergent themes that came from my family genogram were sexual abuse, baby loss, and addiction and alcoholism. And one of the main themes that came out there, that it wasn't safe to be a woman. It wasn't safe to be born into our family if you were female. Right at the very bottom of that, you'll see that I had, when this was done in 2011, I had one grandchild, a male grandchild. So as a result of discovering all of those themes, it absolutely was time for me to heal and time for me to create change. It was time to visit the family with the purpose of actually moving forward through all of the pain. And so, as was mentioned before, I created a series of UK firsts. The first one being the very first ever UK recovery choir. And we had the privilege of going on tour with Squeeze. Does everybody remember Squeeze? You have to be a bit of an 80s chick to remember Squeeze, right? And we went on tour with Squeeze on our version of Cool for Cats. I think it was very, very cool indeed. And the second one, I set up the Brink, which was the very first ever UK recovery dry bar. And as mentioned before, it was a social enterprise. One of the most incredible things that ever happened when we opened the Brink is we got publicity we could never have bought. And that was the Duchess of Cambridge came and did our official opening. You can't buy that kind of publicity, right? She did her very first ever official solo visit without Prince William at our venue. So I got a call from St. James's Palace to say, she's chosen you and she's going to come and visit you on Valentine's Day. But you mustn't tell any of the staff. So I couldn't tell anyone, so we were all having our checks, I'm sure, by MI5 or whoever it was who was checking us out. So we all had our security checks. And then eventually they said, now you can tell the staff that she's coming. So I went to tell staff and I said, we've probably got the most famous woman in the world coming to do our official opening. And they all said, Beyonce. So it wasn't Beyonce, it was the Duchess of Cambridge, but I also informed her and her Royal Equerry that the staff thought it was going to be Beyonce, and regularly I would get emails from St. James's Palace saying Beyonce sends her love. And then the other thing that I've gone on to create was the very first ever National Recovery Walk. What we wanted to do was showcase recovery, make it visible. So addiction is contagious. It kind of completely ravages neighborhoods and communities. What I wanted to do was make recovery visible and make recovery contagious. So we had a national walk, and that's now taken off. With a big charities being set up to manage that, and they've walked around this country in about 7 different cities now since then. And the final thing is where I'm working at the moment, which is Tom Harrison House. So it feels appropriate just being round the corner from the MOD, and my new mates who are Lord Howe and Mark Lancaster, who's the Minister for Veterans. I kind of feel like I hang out with them on a regular basis at the moment. So it feels really appropriate, really, for me to be here just round the corner for there, because I'm really trying to bring the work that I do, so the family of origin stuff, with veterans. And there you can see some of our guys, right? Incredible, incredible, brave men and women. And lots of time people want to actually blame the army. You know, they want to blame the military, they want to blame the MOD for everything that happened to them, why they've ended up in treatment with us. But my job is to break down that us and them thinking. If you consider that they've been trained to see everybody as an enemy, so I'm trying to break down their duality of thinking and bring them back to the universality of love, and to connect them with the memory of their own innocence, which is often really difficult for men in particular, and men who've been trained to fight and to kill. So I'm currently working with the clients that are in Tom Harrison House, looking at their own family of origin history. So they, like I did my genogram, they do their genograms too, and begin to look at actually what was transmitted to them before they went into the armed forces. It couldn't have just been their experience in the armed forces that's created the pain that they're in. It's likely that there was something going on before. And we look at that and we examine whether there has been an intergenerational transmission of trauma or addiction, pre-service vulnerabilities before they enter the Army, the Navy, or the Air Force. This picture, the little boy, is Regan, who I mentioned before. He was right at the bottom of that genogram. Since doing my work on my family of origin, on my genogram, I mentioned that it wasn't safe for a girl to be born there. Actually, what had happened way back when I did my genogram, I discovered that my own auntie had actually murdered her own daughter because she didn't want what happened to her to happen to her own child. And in her postnatal depression, she took her child to a river, a 6-week-old baby, put her in the pram, and took her out and killed her in the river. That's how unsafe it was in our family for girls to be born. And there had not been a girl born in our family for nearly 50 years. And so a year after me doing my genogram, Matilda was born. I had created differentiating steps. I'd begun to turn my pain into purpose and tried to create our family system as something new and safe for females to be born into. And there they are, brother and sister. In the film, Back to the Future, Marty McFly, when he realized the serious impact of what a time machine could do if you go back to change your future, he said, "Man, this is heavy." And it absolutely was heavy for me to go back and to face everything I faced in my family system, to come and interview all my family members and to find out what made me cellular, what was going to create a difference for my grandchildren, what was going to create safety for women to be born into my system. It was difficult, it was heavy, but it was absolutely liberating, incredibly liberating. So it became time for me to transform trauma into triumph, pain into purpose, and all obstacles into opportunities. It's been liberating for me to live this life, and I really thank you for listening to me today, because it's been liberating for me to be able to be here today with love, leadership, and legacy. Thank you.